So here is a while loop to read complex data continually. What do I mean by complex is really that we have different types on a line, but notice again, the pattern is there. It's going to be last name, first name, and then 2 scores, I think. But notice the pattern's the same, but again, different data types. Again, we've actually done this before. The only thing that is different is, again, the while loop is introduced, and we're reading in from that while loop until something blows up. That's the only difference from this whole kit and caboodle that we have here. Okay? Still have the input, still creating our variables in order to do this. There's our while loop. Inside the while loop, I'm reading, and then I'm doing some type of display just to make sure everything's good to go. So this could be in a debug statement. That's fine too. But that's how we can read if it's complex data. Remember, the order matters. I have these colored on purpose. You know my first one's going to be a string. I bet it's a string. Second one's going to be another string. This time I named it appropriately with something first and last here. My first score, there it is. So notice the only thing that's really important and not new is we've got to take care of the order to make sure that it matches exactly what the data file is going to be and what we expect the data to be if we were to manipulate it and display it. The only thing that is different with this example is that this time I'm storing whatever I'm reading in. Now, to be very honest with you, and this says it right here, this is considering that I'm reading in 155 people or less. If I go beyond that, then we got an issue. But we can change these to vectors eventually when we get to that, or maybe we can figure out how many lines are in a file and then create it. There's a lot of different ways, but my real gut instinct on this one is to show you how I can grab that data and now put it into parallel arrays. Notice your I is going to be 0 at first. Then after I grab everything, I'm going to go ahead and increment that to the next item in the array. So I'm shoving all that information now into parallel arrays that then I can go ahead and do what I want with it throughout the rest of my application. But this is important because this is your big structure of if you've got to store all the values somewhere, this is going to use it and you know how to use arrays. So the middle one here is an exercise. You know what? I'm not going to tell you anything. I'm going to have you go ahead and answer those 2 questions, go over it, and I'll go to the last part here. I'll be done. So take a look at it, answer the 2 questions. Back in a second. So number 1 is draw a mock file on paper that would work with this while loop above. So number 1, while loop. You know there's going to be multiple rows in this data. Number 2, we know what type of data is going to be in there. Looks like we're going to have 2 things of strings and another of input, but what is the order going to be? It's going to be first name, last name, and then input. So it's going to be a string, and then an integer to be exact. So an example file is coming up here on the left. Again, it's going to be multiple rows. The data is going to be different. Sure, you can have 2 lines that are the same, and it depends on the application, but still, the overall structure of the file is already kind of set up by using, frankly, the code that we have here. It's a dead giveaway what's on there just by looking at the code. As a matter of fact, see out first name, last name, input. That's kind of what we have here. So use the code to your advantage. Know that you, especially if you're writing things out, or again, if you're reading in, take a look at the file. Look at the pattern that you have in there to determine what the order should be. Finally, what if we actually want to ignore a piece of data? Here's the bad part. When we're reading in from a file, we have to read in every single piece. We can't really skip something. So here's a simple solution. For some reason, this application, I wanted to ignore a number, but I needed first and last name. Notice I read in number, but notice after that, I never use number again. Okay, that's a way of actually, I got to read it in, and then I just don't use that variable anywhere else in my program, then great. Especially if this is in some type of loop, I'm going to read in all of them. I just don't do anything with number. But I've got to read it in order to get it through and then skip on to the data that I really want. So yes, there are going to be some times you might have to ignore data. It's really easy, especially if we have a larger file that has the same pattern. It's really easy to do, but we got to read it in, and we just ignore it after that.